Andreas Heym. Okay, he's the International Development Director for AREP, not to be confused with AREP, and SNCF. He is highly experienced in the creative process of designing public places, public buildings, and intermodal transport terminals, and with their integration into the surrounding urban environment. I found it really fascinating that you have been involved with the TGV expansion from like almost the beginning. So that's super cool. I mean, you must have started when you were in elementary school or something. Anyway, without further ado.
Thanks a lot. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. This is the slides. I will run you through a certain number of our projects, which are a little particular because not so many people know AREP, but in fact, AREP is an urban architecture, urban design and engineering firm, daughter of French Railways for more than 20 years now. And we have done nearly all stations in France because we are an in-house design office of French Railways. And this allowed us to create an international company because we managed to export some of this knowledge to other countries. And today we are close to people with more than 100 people in China and other places. So we did a bunch of stations, which I will go through some of them through our career. We also worked a lot on urban planning, transport system planning, transit-oriented developments. And this is just a map of the blue spots are where we have offices, and the red ones where we have done projects, either realized or studies. We had the chance to work on the San Francisco Bay Area Regional Rail Plan 2006-2008, which gave us for the first time more intimate knowledge about the local situation, and we are following this ever since. But where we're coming from, we are coming from the crossing of rail and city in a certain way, and it is, in fact, always some more or less complicated like that one. We had the chance to start working when the kind of train renaissance was initiated through the TGV, which suddenly gave a new idea to transport, public transport, high-speed rail. And this high-speed record suddenly showed that train can be on another level. This was a kind of game changer for people, what train could be, at least in Europe. And it really changed the French and also the European geography. That means the different lines that were constructed through France, the dark points are the population density that shows that really the train is going from dense areas to dense areas. But the first line was constructed in 1981. The last one we opened is in 2017. So this is an ongoing process for quite a while. So planning for the first line started in the early 70s. So this is a 40-year project. So that the California high-speed rail isn't yet finished is not very much surprising to me. That these things take time. But they changed the geography. But to the left, this is the French map in time by train. So this is how the geography gets transformed through high-speed rail. And what's happened, it gets transformed in people's mind. People don't think anymore this is 500 miles to drive. They think it's 2 hours by train. So whatever distance it is, you know all that. But it was an important element to create the success of high-speed rail. Another important element was the intermodality. That means how to feed these systems. And the fact that suddenly the high-speed rail brought in another typology of passengers, that means people with a bigger budget, so to speak, business travelers, they suddenly expected that the whole system would be of the same level. That means the regional rail, the buses, the tramway, and the station. So without having high-speed rail, we would have never in Europe upgraded all the rest of the system, at least not in the beginning. Then when the whole thing was underway, there was different dynamics. But it's important to understand that the quality of high-speed rail has a direct impact on the quality of the rest of the public transportation system. What is a station? For us, a station is the place where the traveler or transit user becomes pedestrian. That means this is what the yellow area in this map or this plan, that means once you put foot out of a bus or out of a train or out of whatever transit mode and you go to another mode, this is where the station is. Whoever owns that piece, and very often it's through various ownerships, it is covered, not covered, it's managed differently, but the passenger experience, the user experience is this yellow space. And if he's treated well inside this yellow space, he has a good transit experience. Then you still can cover that thing, you can build around, and you can make a city district, whatever you want. But the basic thing is really this idea, how am I treated when I'm a pedestrian? So we like much more to talk about pedestrian-oriented development than about transit-oriented development, because it's the best pedestrian we are talking about. And the fact that this yellow piece is not only on one person's or company's property, but very often on various properties, including city, other operators, private land, etc., this makes it so important that the different stakeholders work together. You can never do a transit project by yourself. It's at least two involved, mostly 5, 6, 7 stakeholders, some only financing, some only operating, some only constructing. So it's very important to have this in mind, that projects have to help to bring stakeholders together. If you don't have a project, you never bring stakeholders together. So, because you will still only writing terms of references, but you will not see what you will have. And people who are not used to think three-dimensional, if you only give them text, this will not make them dream. So you need projects from the very beginning. And this works at all levels. This is the Charles de Gaulle Airport Station we did with Paul Andre and Peter Rice. And this, in fact, this is just what we call an inhabited infrastructure. It's a mixture of ramps and trains and pedestrian bridges, and it's not really a building. It's various floors which are designed in a totally different way, and they are owned by 2 different owners. One is Paris Airport, the other is French Railways. But for the passenger, it's one volume. He doesn't see the 1,000 pages manual of how to operate that and who cleans what, etc. They just see the space that is very easy for them to use. And they have the experience that they see from the station the planes, they understand where they are, and they have a very good connectivity between all modes. And this goes down right to the platform and to every little detail that is dealt with. Many years later in Torino, the high-speed rail station in downtown, Torino Porta Susa, is still in this idea of big volumes where you find your way quite easily. It's a situation where, in fact, the Italian railways had the I have a pointer. No, it doesn't work. Had the tracks on at grade level and brought them down 1 floor to get rid of this cut of the city that the train represented. So we constructed them a long gallery, which is a kind of reference to the local galleries. And this allowed, in fact, for people to suddenly cross the station and cross the whole area, something they couldn't do before. And this became a kind of a center of a development. The tower at the end was part of the project. It's still under discussion. Again, things takes time. But the station is opening for a few years now and is working pretty well. And is still a kind of shining beacon at night for the area. Avignon. Avignon is a station which is pretty interesting. It's in southern France. It's sitting slightly outside of the Avignon downtown, which is to the upper part of the picture. And this station was planned, as you see, there are many car parks. It's a situation where it's not only for the downtown, because some TGVs go directly to the downtown. It's a station for the whole area, so people come from various places and park there. Parking was totally underestimated, and it just keeps growing. But the important thing is that this is, first of all, as a station, not anymore a classical building. It's just a long waiting hall, because the climatic conditions are very specific. There's wind and sun from both sides. So the people are mostly departing from the right. So you see the double train set, 400 meters long, along this building. So it's, in fact, a 300-meter long waiting hall, which allows people quite easily to go to the train, wait inside, and then go outside to the platform in the last moment. What is important, in fact, that it's sitting in a future development area. So while we were doing the station, we did the master plan at the same time for the whole area, and the whole station access road, you see a kind of quite monumental road to the right. This was linked to to a concept of how to access to this future development that is supposed to come. So you see this road is much too big just as a station access. And it took now close to 15 years to make the first developments happening. This is the real master plan of what is going to be built in the next years. And meanwhile, you see to the lower left, additional parking, which is now doubling the existing parking. And you see a new bridge and highway that was planned at that time to be done 10 years later, and now it's happening. So it's again a continuing process, and even if you've finished the station, it goes on and goes on and goes on. Same thing happening in Aix-en-Provence. It's a station close to Marseille, and sitting close also to the Marseille airport. So again, it's the crossing between a local regional highway, I would say, that we diverted to, so it gets under the station and feeds, first of all, parking. There is a long-distance long-time master plan for the development around, but for the people, it's more important to get to that place. This functions nearly like an airport, so there will come some development, but here the transportation part is the most important. And again, it's a very climatically quite complicated area, so you have to make sun sheds on one side. And on the other side, it's people wanted to have a kind of local monument as it's sitting in the middle of a kind of undeveloped area. The local people wanted to have something that can be seen and gives the feeling that from here you can go quite far away. In a similar situation, many years later, this is the Belfort station on the Marseille, on the Lyons to Germany line. Again, you are in a situation that could be somewhere in the Central Valley, maybe. You see the size of these pieces. This is again mostly parking, buses, so all about intermodality. There is now some development going on. It's a crossing of a local rail line with the high-speed line, but the area around is pretty rich. They're doing a lot of car construction, so they wanted to have a station that is more expresses through its look like a car body in a certain way. They wanted to show that this is a rich and important area. So we try to get them this kind of good feeling about their place, and also then make an inside that is pretty much cozy, and you still have the look to the countryside outside. So while you wait, you can have a short break and see the landscape before you go to your maybe more hectic travel. One of the very last stations, we are getting, by the way, more and more to wood. The more the wood gets constructible and easy to deal with. This is a station in the northern France in the extension of the Bretagne high-speed line. So here we are in a small city. It's Lorient, which is now maybe 2 hours away from Paris. And commuting goes both ways. For a long time, we believed that everybody would commute to Paris. That's quite different. People start commuting from Paris to somewhere to the outside because they can live well in Paris, but find better work an hour away or 2 hours away in a smaller city. So it's an interesting phenomenon. And so here we have quite comfortable waiting spaces. And there's still a kind of local monumentality. It's always important that you react to the local community and you do an architectural expression that either refers to a local narrative or to local materials. Here's this boat idea part of the design. The very first TOD that happened in Europe was the Eurolil project, DB North and Eurostar going to London. This was the city of Lille, a more or less rundown industrial town that had its heydays way before, and they found themselves at the crossings between Brussels, London and Paris, more or less an hour away from each of them, and said this is our occasion to develop a long-range master plan and use the existing station and the high-speed rail that was supposed to go in a cut-and-cover operation close to the city center, to use that as the real driver of a new development. And they had the chance that there were 2 metro lines, a tramway line, and this created a kind of transportation center that allowed for the development for a huge commercial center, student housing, hotels, offices. To the left you see the concert hall. And the interesting thing is that not only the station, again, is a linear station where the whole services are all under one roof together with the tracks. This is the kind of design you get more and more. You get away from station buildings and then have platforms. The whole thing becomes more and more an integrated volume. And this is a pretty infrastructure-ridden area, but still, when you're in there, it works very, very well. It's very urban, very walkable, and for 25 years, this station was opened in '93. For 25 years, they are still doing more development around it, and the two stations are where the red squares are. And from the left to the right of this whole photo, this is ongoing housing, offices, renovation. So it's really a TOD that was not just a one-shot. This triggered a whole renovation of the city. When you look at some of the bigger Parisian stations, again, these stations are existing for 100 years, and they have been renovated. And what you see on this image to the left, you see some modern glass volumes. These were things we have recently added because we didn't have enough space. One of the problems with existing stations and rising traffic is that they get too small at the end of the day. And as they are historic, you have very often difficulties to make them bigger. So you add new sheds, you add new waiting spaces, but it's still not enough. And now we have to make a second layer of additions to these exterior spaces to make new shops, new passenger facilities, because these stations also become hubs for the community. That means not only travelers go there, you have the whole people from the area to do their shopping inside, and sometimes people just go there to sit around, have a coffee. So you see these kind of extensions that you are putting against the historical building. And even now the city wants to make a concert hall under the station square. This is their newest idea because they feel this would be the right location because there are so many people, so it's perfect for a public venue. Marseille is interesting because this shows how important it is that the cities and the railway, the city and the railways and the other stakeholders work together. This is the extension of an historic building that is a stub-end station, and what you can see on the aerial photo to the left, to the very left, you have to look, it's a little far away from you, I'm sorry for that, but you see a bus station and you see a road that is cutting the bus station from the trains. You have a building that has been put over the tracks in the 60s and the station. To the very left, you have the university, lots of people walking through that, and this was just an impossible environment. And you see the plan below. And the fact that the city and the architects and the railways could work together allowed us to close that street. The city bought one of the blocks, tore it down, which allowed to put the bus station directly on an extension of the historic station building. So you have a kind of new concourse that you see to the lower right, which now brings together the buses, the regional rail, the long-distance trains, and the high-speed rail. So you have this extension, which in fact is the other side of the bus station, which now suddenly feeds into a common volume with the trains. And inside you have a commercial center and various services that link the historical and the new building. This took a long time to get done. There were, I think, 12 stakeholders that all financed that. And the important thing that nobody financed just this column or this underpass or this piece of roof. There was a kind of common budget that was done through the project that had been done by us, by architects, which was costed at a certain level. And then the stakeholders discussed between each other what percentage of this cost they might take. And they couldn't say in the end, for my 12%, I got this wall. It was just a part of the overall project. But then they established a project coordination team that managed all that. And so governance of these kind of projects is a very, very important point, that you have people who run that thing. Strasbourg, again, is a situation where over time the station, in fact, degraded. That was very good at some time. The upper left was when it was open, sitting in the park, very beautiful. 100 years later, it looked like the photo just below. The park was gone. The city, for whatever reason, had made a big pavement. This is the Christmas market once a year. The rest, it was empty. And so there was a tramway under that, but as the station was very thin, they couldn't get the tramway in the station, so they put it on the square. Nothing really worked. And when we started extending it for the TGV East, because there was just not enough square there, the only possibility again was to extend it outside. So we redid the square, we reorganized intermodality, and we constructed a huge glass volume in front of that, which in fact at daytime has its own shape, but at nighttime becomes totally transparent. And so you have this dialogue between the old and the new. This could be Diridan, but so it's this kind of thing, which again you need to do with all the stakeholders, because the roof was paid by the city and is sitting on city ground, because the railway property ends right where the wall ends. So the traveler doesn't see that. He just goes through it and thinks it's one thing. But in fact, it's owned by various people and operated by SNCF, but on the behalf of the city. Le Mans is the same thing on a smaller scale. This is the historical situation before high-speed rail arrived. What you see on the lower part is a very disorganized station square, lots of buildings. To the upper side, more or less wasteland. And what is in addition complicated, which I think you will have all over the place, the map to the below is the different ownerships. So the red square on top shows where the map is, and the different color dots were different owners, either inside the railway or private or whatsoever. So how to make of that one project? So we managed to do a master plan because the city wanted to bring the tramway in a light rail. So this light rail allowed, in fact, to reorganize the whole thing, tear all these buildings down, and to generate a totally a quite different, more organized space, which in fact is organized around, again, a small canopy that you, this time it's much smaller, it's a much smaller station, you're 1 hour away from Paris, which allowed to bring together all the modes into one, what we call a kind of transportation gallery. It's like a spine where you plug in the buses, the taxis, cars, and the tramway, and this gives a pretty nice, pretty dense, pretty easy walkable place for changing trains from one to the other. And this gallery ends up like a public walkway into a TOD development, which is happening to the left in the sketch. What you might not have as much, at least not in these dense situations, but you have a lot in Europe, is railway wasteland along the tracks, because the train came in the end of the 19th century. Most of these times to the left, to the right is city center, it's Nancy. To the left, this was constructed later, and the train having its own geometry, it integrates in no city grid or whatsoever, it just goes through. And so it takes you quite a while to get this reorganized, because again, ownership is totally split in I don't know how many people. It has to be phased, who pays what at what time. So you need again a master plan that you have to develop with the city to be able over the years, this I think we're 15 years on that, to get it organized in such a way, get the utilities redone, the roads redone, and to make it a TOD, which doesn't look like fruit whale, but it's or something similar. But this is the TOD that you can do in an existing situation. It's not a greenfield development. In countries that you wouldn't believe in, this is Myanmar of all places. This is Yangon. These kind of countries are working now on these kind of developments. This is Yangon main station. You see a kind of British historical building at the left end of this huge track-spanning structure. And at the same time, this is a master plan we did for them, you have offices, housing on a totally different scale from what we are doing. And this is not even China. This is Myanmar. This is Indonesia, Bandung. again, something you wouldn't believe that they are at this level of development and investment. So again, over construction, huge commercial development over the tracks, and a kind of more green architecture, but again, a new city face. So even these countries now manage to reform and push their transit further. China is doing this for quite a while. This is a Wuhan Station that we constructed a few years ago. So here you are on a really different scale. This is 16 tracks on elevated structure, and you have interior spaces that are not even in a European scale. And this kind of, we happen to construct several stations in China. This is Qingdao. So here you are totally in the airport model, again, some 20 tracks, and you have interior spaces that are very different from what we know that the station was at some time. Shanghai South, this was a first big station we constructed in China. This is a 230 meters, so this is 700 yards across circular station, where the highways that were running around, we just put the highway around the station, so you have a 700 meter long drop-off, so that's quite easy. And you have just a huge circular space inside where people wait on top of the tracks, very much like the American system. You wait before you go to your board, and you see people boarding on the lower part of the picture. So this kind of scale is different but inspiring if you can work on these kind of projects. And these projects in the beginning were not supposed to be TOD. Now even the Chinese change and integrate in these kind of stations. This is Jinan East that we just won. You have a huge circular ring that you guess on the other side of this enormous bridge structure. But the transit-oriented development, so to speak, radiates directly into the station. So the whole thing is a composition where the station and the urban development becomes one piece, and then has this kind of urban atmosphere where the station isn't anymore. It is monumental by itself, but it just feeds in the surrounding district. And to finish, this is brand new, so you're one of the few people who have seen that yet. We just won 9 stations that are on the high-speed line from Beijing to the Winter Olympics 2022. And just give you a few images to what the Chinese are up to now with our help. So this is it's a station in Beijing where this thing starts. And this is just to go to the Olympics. So you see the kind of scale again that they are able to do. And these are a few stations on the line, which are more referenced to nature, more integrated in the environment. There is summer activity and winter and summer activity. And when you come to the end, the station is underground, given the local situation, so it totally blends in, and you don't really see it anymore. You just go down and have again this ring, the circular motif, which is so important for the Chinese. And in fact, what we are doing now, today, is much more urban planning than station planning, in fact. This is an eco-city in Wuhan, where it's really a kind of concept city about how the future TOD will look like, which is not anymore about housing or things like that. It's about the whole city. It's about resilience, how you bring in urban agriculture, how you mix a central park, which is now suddenly a field, and really it's not an exhibition field, it's a real working agricultural piece, how you bring this close to a stadium, how you crisscross this with transit, and how you bring people close to that. So we call this City for Sharing, which is now the way we are working, how to make TOD wider and to really get a new feel what the city of tomorrow will be with transit, but also way beyond. Thank you.